All I can give you is my blood. Lawrence watched as Dr. Harald flipped through a large book, laying flat out in front of him. Occasionally he noted down names and other basic information on individual pieces of paper that he put in a pile beside him. Lawrence was standing behind him, occasionally looking away into the open fireplace of his office. Eventually he seemed to have uncovered all the names he sought, and he neatly assembled the pile of notes.
There we are, Vicar.
How many?
7.
That will do fine. He closed the book and stood up, evidently spotting his uneasiness.
I must say, I'm optimistic. But, is this another supposedly confidential endeavor?
Why do you ask? Why wouldn't it be?
Well, I suppose the field is so utterly unexplored. Such matters of delusion. Well, I must admit I have always pondered a psychological remedy. But with the blood, I guess it was not to be.
Lawrence looked him into his eyes, raising one eyebrow.
What I mean is, any procedure would be deemed experimental. Gods know all the victims in pursuit of remedy.
Such old efforts had primitive and flawed methods. He looked back into the receding fire. But yes, the healing blood may not heal everything. No, with matters of the soul, the vitality of life, the blood remains simply a corporeal remedy.
That's what I mean. These water treatments, with phantasms, I mean. I cannot see how it will fail.
It might very well just do that. It is still an unexplored field.
Of course. Pardon my eagerness, Vicar. Science evolves by the day, it seems.
It... what? He turned to him, having been struck by his wordage.
Yes, first the blood, then these angelic beings backed by science. Nothing short of remarkable.
Ah, just that... never mind. But keep it confined to the upper floor for now, as a precaution for symptoms.
Just like the frenzy patients. I hear you, Vicar. And about the procedure?
You'll get all the information from the Menzies office. Not much has changed, besides the quantity of water. They both looked over when the double door creaked open, and Luna, uncharacteristically slowly, entered. Lawrence sighed as he turned his chin up at her in an estranged greeting. Leave us, would you, Harold? He nodded and departed, nodding similarly to her on his way out. She looked after him as the door closed and retained her eyes there long enough for Lawrence to avert his attention back to the fire. Patience? She finally said from across the room. He nodded, and her low steps walked closer over the carpet. Huh. You just went ahead. Perhaps we should talk about work at home. How come?
Please, Lawrence. How childish of you.
I know. I'm deeply sorry. I was just so caught. More than I ever dared to think.
Duly noted. You have been like a ghost.
But it's over now. And again, I am sorry. I'm ready to finally unravel this.
Not alone, I trust.
No, but... She sighed, crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. Her body language made him want to reach out after her, but he stopped himself. Not like that. But I am concerned for Maria.
Oh. Well, that I understand. I am as well.
She considerably relaxed and turned to him. Her vibrant green eyes flickered in the light of the fire as one side of her face was cast in darkness, the other glowing orange. After all this time, what came back with her? With all of us? I fear it never truly released Maria in particular from its grip because she clung back.
The saints. The treatment is partially helping them, though I fear the true cause is... We must uncover this fully, not step on our toes around it.
I know. I have the patients suitable for treatment. Their afflictions are of the mind, every one of them.
Like the saints' hysteria?
Yes, but of variations.
Good.
He glared into the fire until the shapes within started to appear like the furious waves of an ocean, angry at him for what he once did. He looked away, turned and stood over the table. "Cause," he muttered.
That cord.
Luna walked to stand beside him.
It could act as a medium, but I'm not certain yet.
He nodded. Maria. I don't want her to know about it. The phantasms. The link to it all.
Might become difficult.
I don't care. I don't want to see her like that again. Never again.
Me neither. But what about the truth?
He bit his lower lip. At first an absent-minded gesture, but once he bit harder, he was sickly charmed by the pain, and he bit harder. He caught himself when he tasted blood and snapped out from his manic behavior. He licked his lip and looked away so Luna would not notice. Truth is not for everyone. Not all can handle it. I want to see her save her saints. Then I want to see her realize the grace of it all once she sees its effect. But the truth at the moment is obscure. I know that if she were to take the reins, she would lose herself in the darkness. Gammon always said her heart was too pure from the very beginning. But I can take the reins. I'll gladly do it alone, for I am not afraid of the darkness ahead.
While Mikuláš was filling in the daily report, he would often look up at Luna, who was currently overseeing the production of phantasms. Using a compound of old blood, a strange form of cloning process was facilitated. From their time researching the little bodies, it had been imprinted to his senses to always be wary of his master's next action. Since he had long ago learned it was impossible to predict their work, much like Luna herself, he preferred to simply have one eye aimed at her, and he considered himself quite good at it. Back then, the phantasms had reacted strangely to a great many things. Among them was the discovery that they reproduced quite rapidly within crustacean lifeforms, which suited their purposes, and old blood prolonged their lifespan, or active phase, as their animation was not all that familiar to how life commonly is perceived. While she oversaw the personnel harvesting the little invertebrate slugs, Mikuláš was archiving all the patient developments into a ledger. With one finger brushing down a patient sheet, he primarily looked for the bottom line, "No changes." It was the most common, and would result in him writing the patient's name in the column, their condition, and a sharply drawn line. At times there was the odd curiosity when sparks of lucidity had overcome them. Depending on the type of delirium, some patients could exhibit changes in their speech pattern into a much more sober and coherent one. Others' examples seemed to calm them greatly to levels where they would appear normal, although still retaining their stunted disabilities when they were tested. He jumped in his seat when Luna suddenly and quite rapidly walked away from the tub of water. However, she simply went to fetch some clean towels, but had been rather dramatic in doing so. He relaxed and returned to his documentation. Again he almost scraped the pen over the paper when the sound of a door slammed open. He turned to see Lady Maria standing there, looking furiously at Luna.
"Come with me this instant!"
Her loud tone and menacing stature caused Luna to act in a completely foreign manner. She simply dropped what she was doing and jogged with a tail between her legs after Maria, who had already turned in the doorway. No witty comment or casual remark to the others, simply a sheepish compliance. Only after she had vanished did Mikuláš regain his facilities and resumed his primary duty, shadowing Luna. Both of the ladies were incredibly quick, and he had to run up the stairwell to catch up. He did not dare to ask neither of them what was going on. Like Luna, he simply followed with a growing, unsettling curiosity. Luna almost collided with the tall lady when she suddenly stopped outside of a closed door.
"Luna,
She hissed angrily, but seemed too enraged to complete her sentence. A fact realized by the woman herself as she scoffed and grabbed firm the doorknob to gently open it. Inside sat the Lady Caelid at the patient's bedside, holding his hand. On the other side of the bed stood a man examining something that made Mikuláš freeze in the doorway with terror. It partially frightened him so suddenly because he had initially believed the patient was physically normal, and upon discovering that was not the case, had become startled. But true fear developed once the reality of the anomaly was acknowledged. The patient's head had started to swell unnaturally. His forehead and entire left side had bulged outward. The swelling was not irritated, or any cause for it was apparent. In light of how still the patient was along with the pale skin, he seemed almost dead. Carrie looked towards him. He thought that her expression was the same as his own, albeit more composed from acclimatization. Lady Maria was no longer as furious, but appeared much more saddened as she turned to Master Luna.
Tell me then, what is it you have done?
Luna stammered a bit at the accusation, looking at the patient.
I have no clue. How could I foresee this? Something must be wrong. How do you treat something like this, let alone cause it?
Luna stood right by the patient's side, who had so far done nothing in response to what transpired around him. She looked at the doctor.
What is this? Is it a treatment?
I can only assume it is. Whatever could be the cause?
Of course it is.
Maria returned to sounding rather angry.
Nothing can explain away this you've caused. But what can I say, Maria?
The imposing lady sneered and looked over at the doctor. The skull started to erode. I speculate the phantasms produce some form of liquid. But, the brain is preserved.
What? How?
Well... He glanced over at Carol, who started stroking the patient's hand, then addressed him softly.
Hello. Can you hear me?
The head twitched slightly, and the area at the bottom, the bloated jaw, now protruding like a fleshy pulp, started to move.
Oh, is that you, my lady?
The voice was surprisingly clear, despite all the deformities, suggesting the internal structure, ranging from the throat allowing speech to the brain allowing thought, was still very much intact.
I'm here. How are you feeling?
Sorry? I did not catch that.
She leaned towards him a bit.
How are you feeling?
Oh, it's loud sometimes. There's a breeze that comes and goes. I must be near the ocean. Must be.
You are still in the cathedral.
Oh, of course. How strange. But I welcome the sound. It's like nothing else. It's talking to me.
Do you know what it is saying?
No, it is too loud. But there are utterances within. Oh, how I wish I could hear it properly. Then I could tell Lady Maria all about it.
Lady Maria?
The woman herself slumped meekly down in a chair, standing along the wall, just behind Caryll at her mentioning.
Of course. She's the one I think would like to hear it too. It's all so pleasant. Just like her. I do hope it will make her smile. Do tell her if you can that I'll try and make her smile. If only I could understand it just a little better.
Caryll turned to Maria.
I will tell her that.
When Mikolash turned to see her reaction, Maria looked away from them. He only caught sight of the beginning of a tear traveling down her cheek before her hand obscured it. Behind a glass window looking into the treatment room, Mikolash felt considerably safer. Most of the time it was a doctor, a nurse or some other assistant he did not know, treating one of the horribly deformed patients. Realistically, what separated them was a glass frame and a door, but who's to say what lay behind that door? He himself had never gone through it. He did not need to. He simply had to peer through the glass at a location that might very well be some other place entirely. Administration reports simply appeared on his desk after he vanished upon the procedure's completion. There was no need to speak with the people beyond the glass as they assisted the patients with the imbibement of water. He simply had to observe and take notes on what he saw. The job did not require him to engage further than that. And even better, to think more about it. The patient lying in the middle of the room atop a rolling stretcher suddenly threw the bulbous head up. The arms started to thrash around and scratch at the head. He heard a scream muffled by the walls, but he saw no mouth on the patient, so perhaps it was someone else.
Oh my.
He commented to himself as he noted down the reaction. The doctor and his assistant restrained the patient onto the table, arms tied down by his side, as blood had started to paint the scratch marks. The doctor retrieved an apparatus that he strapped over the head after it had been properly restrained in place. 3 metal prongs entered into the head with no reaction from the patient, holding it in place. Then the doctor started to twist the central screw in between the frames fastening to the head. More and more, very slowly, it pierced the head, and yet no remark from the patient that had resorted to an absent mumble that occasionally sounded like discomforted groans. But then again, the sound might be anything. All he needed to note down was that there was no reaction from the patient.
Always with the heads.
He commented again and started, with a trembling hand, to draw little circles in the corner of the paper, instead of looking at the clear substance being poured out from the bloated head. He first peeked inside Master Elvina's private office, but found it empty. He looked around the vacant corridor and hesitantly proceeded ahead. He turned his head down the right, where a broader corridor opened up. On both sides were two open spaces where he spotted Elvina standing over a table. When she saw him, he waved with the report, and she motioned for him that she wanted it immediately.
Very good. How was it?
Oh, well, you know. He trailed off, but she did not mind, with her eyes more interested with the papers.
Look at this here, Miko.
She stepped back a bit from the table and turned to him. The bundle of documents she threw on a counter along the wall beneath some shelves. He did not advance out of repulsion of the strange remnants of a creature morphed beyond recognition, instead remaining where he stood.
A frog, but it has no legs, as you can see.
He nodded and glanced at her, hoping his reluctance was visible enough for her to release him from the explanation.
Why do you think that is?
The phantasms.
Indeed. But I wanted to show you what it is they do. Strange to evolve from having legs to not have legs, wouldn't you say?
He nodded.
But from what we can observe with evolutionary biology, is that traits are subjects for eradication, sometimes to favor a new superior one, or because behavior deemed it redundant. The state this common frog is evolving towards is that of the phantasms themselves. As you can see, the frog is becoming an invertebra life form.
Yes, that I understand. She looked up with mild astonishment. Had it not been so genuine, he would have thought she was mocking him.
Yes, but they perish now, don't they? Herein lies the importance and the grace. See, a frog lacks our capabilities. This is why phantasms are guides.
Guides? I don't think I've heard that before.
Oh, you have. You hear it in all the graced patients.
She was looking with overwhelming delight at the malformed frog carcass. Her eyes not really focused on it, as she was too absorbed by her trail of thought.
They are directly in contact with that pull of evolution. Whoever is pulling it is using the phantasms. That is why, unfortunately, life forms such as frogs perish. There simply is no need for them, for they cannot transcend.
She glanced at him, raising her right eyebrow, and smirked expectantly until he spoke. But we can. The smirk became a full, teeth-exposing smile.
Recipients of a greater will. Of course there will be conscious snags here and there. You know, as they try to reveal the pulse direction. Our thoughts are bound to become blurred by all the new sights and sounds. The process might appear startling, but does not every half-truth appear strange? Even startling.
He opted to look down at the frog to escape her overbearing glare. Indeed, but might I ask, what about the metamorphosis?
What about it?
Well, you said that they lose their limbs, or the like. The amount of fluid created in the brain by the phantasms might be just that. I'm sure I have not grasped it all, but it does seem rather, impractical. She shrugged.
It's not perfect yet, naturally. Keep in mind that this process lacks any ties to the holy blood. The phantasms simply use these carcasses to multiply. That's what their fate surmounts to. Yet inside a human, the symbiosis is much more complex and delicate. Seeing how we don't perish, but are revealed the secrets of the phantasms, our fate is thus proven to be far greater.
The Blood Saint was the great holy figure for the people. They had especially received plenty of appraisals during the recent times of struggle. Though not quite as involved in the operations of the church as the commoner would think, they certainly were not like the rest of the populace either. However, with no legitimate stature to speak of within the church, while being treated like the very gods themselves by the faithful, a strange seclusion took form, and the only firm comfort provided was with the fellow blood saints. As it never was their individual choice having this gift, the ladies were from every branch of life, and as it were, this phenomena only occurred with just ladies. Adelaine had been there from the beginning, and naturally was drawn to those that came after her. Inspired by her engagement and the sudden solidarity of their new duties, few of the saints resisted her interactions. Especially so when their blood was needed in bulk. The ashen blood was fiercely cumbersome to their fatigue, and with little mood for activities, they had only each other's company left. It wore on Adeline's conscience to see them endure. Not that it was her place to feel guilty or to do anything about it, but all the same, that's how friends often feel for each other. Then there was the distressing matter of a strange affliction within their midst. But strangely, it seemed that the good Lady Maria and other clerics obsessed more over this than the saints themselves. Initially, Adeline had thought it somewhat reasonable to suffer so noticeably. A great deal of anxiety paired with the torpor of having their blood taken, a manifestation in behavior felt like a certainty. But it was the clerics that naturally knew best. But now it appeared to blow over. the beginning of the end, and she cannot help but smile among the others' tired and worn-out expressions.
Oh, Lenora, lighten up. I have something you'd like to know.
She and 2 others had joined together in the lounge room of the Grand Cathedral's clinic reception. It rarely got any patients, as it was more of an information center and only for so-called special patients. A great retreat for them, as they had to be accessible at all times.
Do tell me they have extinguished this bother. My nerves are what starts to ache, not my veins.
Adeline giggled.
Then you are in luck. I will tell you it is just that. Or at least what Lady Maria told me.
The prospect of returning to their fairly normal routine before the crisis revitalized all present, and they turned around to look attentively at her.
She told me that the church might have been able to stem the tide. It was actually some form of official announcement, but I do not recall what exactly. But the point was that there now have been so few patients in the recent days that they are considering closing some of the emergency clinics.
They shared in a joyous peep that consumed the last of their energy and prompted them to slump back into their seats. But recounting her encounter conjured the whole event in her head. She had run into a ghost of her friend at the plaza, from who she had received the grand news. Lady Maria had been short with the encounter, and she looked like sleep had not found her for days. Adeline had insisted on a conversation, satisfying her desire to finally talk to her absent friend and about the work transpiring in the research hall, in addition to the curiosity concerning her absence. But she was never able to talk thoroughly about it for 2 reasons. For one, it was a difficult topic, and secondly, Maria had appeared too much in a hurry to get away from her that it simply did not feel appropriate. Upon further pursuing her attention, she had stopped, looked long into her eyes with a mournful look, and given the information she had just relayed to her peers, and left. After the fact, this event bothered Adeline to the degree she felt a proper visit was in order. Her shifting expression from her quiet recollection must have been apparent as the others grew concerned.
What is it, Adeline? Oh, I just remembered something. Excuse me, would you?
She stood and abruptly left, making her way for the research hall. Having just begun her ascent up the curving stairway pillar, she spotted a doctor she knew coming her way, a man by the name of Citus. She regarded him as one of the more sympathetical clerics. Surprising as it may be, many clerics' only motivation was apparently the advancement of their stature within the establishment.
Citus, good to see you.
Oh, Saint Adeline, a pleasure. I thought you went on break.
I wanted to visit Lady Maria. Is she available?
He peered up the stairs with uncertainty.
She just retired to the clock tower. I am afraid she's not particularly warm to visitors at the moment. But she always makes exceptions for you.
Oh well, thank you. Is she... I sensed something was troubling her. Might you know what?
A great many things, I fear. The same things that troubles us all. But Our Lady truly takes them to heart. She is rather dismayed by our discoveries.
She is?
Well, yes, but naturally she had hoped it would be a stable remedy. But let's just say it opened up quite the rabbit hole.
Judging by the fading of his forced chuckle, the rabbit hole could not have been very pleasant.
I see. But it does treat us saints, right?
Oh, naturally. The sessions do a great deal if maintained regularly. And I hear the revelations are nothing short of exhilarating. If not a little, how should I put it, convincing.
She looked up towards the furthest reaches of the hall.
Uh-huh. Well, I should depart.
Citus nodded a goodbye and continued past her on his way down. She continued up. When exiting the door that led to the outside's lofty garden, she stopped to admire it. She reminisced that back then, and only then, had she seen a version of Maria that must be true. A woman that, despite herself, could bring out the best in someone, just like the flowers they had tended together. Flowers she looked upon now, perhaps just like her patients, had grown thanks to her. But owing her own budding to this incredible woman, she felt small in comparison, but with a desire to grow further, for her sake. Inside the astral clock tower, she sat in a chair, forlornly facing the large circular dial at the end of a massive and disorganized table. She undoubtedly heard the creak of the door, but did not look.
Maria?
Hearing it was her must have been the factor that made her turn to look over the backrest of the chair.
Adelaine, what brings you up here? Not the view, I gather. No, I wanted to see you. It has been so long and you were gone for some time.
She turned back towards the clockwork. The evening sun shone through, making Maria's visage a black silhouette in the light.
I felt something was troubling you last. You know you can come to me if you are sad.
Sad? Whatever made you think like that? She sounded sarcastic. Adelaine did not perceive if she really was not sad, or insinuated that she was. Her words were so cold and her demeanor kept her from walking closer.
But there must be something, right?
Maria stood up ominously soundless from her chair, with fists clenched.
Please, would you not pry so?
Her anger was clearly held back. Adelaine felt only more compassion by her clear show of restraint.
I won't. Sorry. But perhaps I can do something anyway.
Maria started walking towards her over the large floor, appearing to grow more at ease.
I need nothing of you, dear Adelaine. Oh, there must be something. I want to help, and you need not tell much, as long as it would make you happy. I hear good things about the treatments. Perhaps it might do me good, just to be sure, that is. A resistance of sorts?
With a desperate face, Maria rushed towards her in the final distance between them. Distressed by her suggestion, she grabbed hold of her shoulders. For a visibly delicate flower of a lady, her strength could easily overwhelm any man. A strength that now gripped her tight out of frustration.
No, by the most holy. Do not dare tangle yourself up in that mess, you hear? It is your blood. Those ravenous bastards would pollute your mind if you ever gave them your will. If you want to do anything for me, stay away from them. Maria!
The indication of pain prompted Maria to release her and stumble backwards.
My blood. Sorry. Your blood is precious, yes, but...
She held her hands on her shoulders more gently, stroking them.
Oh, the blood and that makes me shudder. Just be careful. Do only what you are certain of. Not something you are told to do, even if they claim it is good for you. I won't.
Adeline felt no more urge to speak. She took a few nervous steps backwards, out of Maria's hands, and keeping eye contact. Then turned on her heels and left her friend to her own devices. With her head low and shoulders drawn tight, Adeline stood outside the main corridor entrance of the upper floor, nervously biting her nails. Each time someone emerged, she felt herself become startled and even more on edge. This also applied when Mr. Wynne emerged with a hand case. He almost did not see her.
Mr. Wynne?
He turned and was about to warmly greet her, but grew concerned when seeing the state she was in.
Is everything all right? I don't know. Everything feels so wrong. Am I truly a saint?
He cast a glance down the stairs, suggesting he was in a rush, but he later placed the case to the floor, giving her his full attention. It made her degree of worry admittedly lessen a bit. Why, of course you are.
I don't feel like one. Not like the ones from Legends.
Where is all this coming from, Adeline? She attempted to continue ravage her nails with her teeth, but quiveringly withdrew the hand.
I think it's starting to happen to me, Win.
She whispered with shame.
I'm afraid I'll do something. More so, afraid of what will compel me to do so. What if I start to hate the dear Lady Maria? How could I?
There. It's good that you voice your suspicions. We'll make an examination before we decide on treatment, all right? How does that sound?
She turned her chin up to look at the door leading out to the garden, thinking about dear Lady Maria. She had done so much for all of them, and even before her time, she had achieved great things, all because of her character, her passion, her willpower. She was the true saint. For a saint acts and dares to walk the path ahead of them until the very end, no matter what obstacles comes before them. She turned back to Win.
Mr. Win, I dare not call myself a saint. Not yet. I want to do everything I can for the church and for Lady Maria.
Citus and his fellow peers all stood proudly at the sides on the evening when proof would be had. Results to be seen. In a grand chamber high up in the research hall had they congregated, them more so out of privileged observance than in assistance of the conduction. Present was also Carol's class of mystics. Strangely enough, the woman herself was absent. Other dignitaries of higher grade within both the hall and the School of Mensis section made the group into quite the gathering. Gracing the event was also the mastermind behind it, Luna of Mensis, and a reluctant-looking Lady Maria.
Are we ready?
Luna confidently broke the anticipative silence of the circular room and attracted everyone's gazes.
We are.
A lady of the mystic announced, and stepped onto a dark red round cloth laid in the middle of the floor. 3 more of her associates stepped in from a doorway to the side, each leading a subject. The procedure had commenced. Along the walls stood large tubs of the mixture Citus' team of researchers had worked tirelessly on for days to cultivate, and were now being drained by the assistant personnel, filling it in sizable jugs. At first glance, it did indeed resemble simple and plain water to the letter, but that was the intention. Long had they sought to stimulate the phantasms properly, to give enough clarity to their symbiotic human host. Citus thought himself to have found the key once a pattern developed in certain blood-administered patients. It confirmed the theory that phantasms preferred certain hosts, and that their blood stimulated them. With the successful blueprint being a supposed great one, cause of the sea, it was hard to tell what came first, blood or phantasms. But indubitably, she possessed both, and the trick was to impart both in proper fashion, which Cytus now stood firm, believing them having unlocked said fashion. The mystics entered the circle and were all now standing inside the dark red, along with the subjects. They spoke softly to them as they encouraged them to lay down. Pillows had been laid down for the four of them. They looked fidgety, yet resolute. They lay to form a cross, feet almost touching each other's. One mystic each sat down by the patient's right side on their knees, turned towards them. The mystic grabbed the hands of their adjacent subject and brought them together, keeping hold of them over the patient's chest. The one that had been in the room prior to the subjects stood over the circle and started a soothing hymn, a wordless, gentle sound with graceful transitions of tones, fully displaying the wonders of the female voice. All were indeed affected by its beauty, in particular the subjects. After a couple of minutes, she started slowly fading out her hymn.
Now,
she spoke, on the edge of a whisper.
join hands.
The mystics by the subject's side gently took their limp arms and moved them over to the one beside them. They each grabbed hold of each other gently.
Feel the pulsating warmth of each other. A current flows in you, and it is heading towards the sea.
Luna made an inward waving gesture, and the assistants approached with the jugs, as silent as they could, so as to not disturb the procedure.
Imbibe the water.
They carefully brought the jug to their mouths and started to tilt it slowly.
The howl of the sea beckons you. Let the current be your guide. Let the water take you. Feel it flow into you. Then continue along.
She spoke caringly, like a mother, and seductively, like a lover.
Feel the pulse of each other. Your rivers merge. Feel them merging, joining in a flow that heads for the sea.
She started the hymn again. The jugs were emptied, and the next turn of assistant came in at the ready with vessels already filled. They drank calmly and took their time, stopping to compose themselves and resume once again. Once an assistant had their vessel emptied, the one at his back deftly took his place and resumed the procedure.
No rush, like how the blood flows through you, so are you carried by the current together. It is the sea that draws you, that reaches out for you. Now, take its hand, become one with its pull. Find the call, find the call of the sea.
Once more the jugs were emptied and switched off by the new ones. The subjects lay still. The only thing that changed about them was their avarice for the drink when it came to them. The mystics continued with their hymns. Their whole head shot up to greedily imbibe. The sight was surreal. They were still like the dead, no motion under their eyelids, barely any breathing. Yet every time the jug would come, they would reanimate their head to get more of the drink. After some time, the exact time was hard to tell, but it must have been a good amount at least. The concoction was all dried up, and the rounds ceased. They waited. The hymn tirelessly continued. One of the subjects started to whisper something. The adjoining mystic leaned cautiously in to hear what it was. A look of confusion came about her, and she shook her head at the others. Luna started to bite her nails, and Maria leaned forward in her chair. The soothing hymn continued without fail. The subject continued to whisper in what sounded like a completely foreign language. Although it was hard to make out, syllables and sentences were clearly constructed, but in such a manner completely alien to him. Then, what would be perceived as the final stage of the procedure commenced. It started out small. At first, Citus thought it was something wrong with his own field of view. A dim patch had begun growing in his sight, like his vision started to blur. But it was not him, nor his eyes. Everyone saw it, and it was placed right above the circle of the subjects. It grew, larger and larger, darker and darker. Soon it looked like reality had started to fade and had revealed the black nothingness behind it. Frightening, until little lights started to appear, one by one, as if lit by someone. They appeared in the dark window. Then it was apparent. They were all staring into the night sky. Stars and bright dancing colors from the void. Then the whisper stopped. He tore his eyes from the impossible sight, down at them. Their eyes were wide open, filled to the brim with terror. The silence was soon replaced with another sound. It came from everywhere, all around them. A low, large basal sound, akin to the sound of a stream or echoes of a cave. A deep voice, even. A sound never heard before. In some ways it resembled the hymn, but there was no voice making it, and it shifted in tones. Tones never heard before. The subject slowly started to groan. They writhed on the ground like in pain. They tried to grab at themselves to do anything about what ailed them, but could not find where. One hulked up some of the white, murky concoction. Maria stood up, shaken.
Stop this! Stop this! Now! Take them out of this!
The otherworldly sound grew fainter, and the black windows started to slowly vanish. The mystic grabbed at the patients, raising their hands, tugging at their shoulders and urging them to wake up. But their behavior grew more and more worrisome, and so too did their pain. When one of their bones forcibly snapped, the mystic stepped back in fright. The subjects were left on the floor, with whatever was happening to them. Their limbs broke. Then ensued some sort of transformation. Their feet and arms started to stretch, growing longer. By now they were screaming, no words, just agonizing howls. One grabbed with a malformed yet functional arm around his head. Then a sickening pop sounded. His whole head expanded violently, then slumped down over the floor where he lay. His skull seemed to have burst from within. The mystics fled. Everyone else was in shock, either staring blankly into nothing or hollering. Luna could not look away. Lady Maria, with tears running down her eyes, was having enough of it. She rushed to one and raised him up into her arms. While sitting up, his skull also burst similarly to the other, a mass of skin limply laying down over his shoulders. Cytus would have fled along his companions, had he not noticed that they never appeared to die. Those with only a mushy clump of skin for head continued to address the pain with screams. Fear treats everyone differently. Some had the luck to have gotten a surge of energy that carried them far away from there. Others, including himself, had frozen in place, forced to bear witness. Soon enough, they calmed down with Lady Maria still keeping a tight grip of a man that now had been replaced with something else. Towering over her was someone who, limbs forcibly extended and sitting still hunched within her arms, was no longer a man. Arms and legs were now deprived of any musculature and were only skin-wrapped bones. Like magic they had reassembled themselves into functioning limbs that now rose up to return Lady Maria's sympathetical embrace. Morbidly long and slender arms wrapped around her with sickening long fingers curling to hold her. The torso seemed almost spared of the transformation, but resembled that of a starvation victim. Then there was their heads, and the now bluish hue to their skin. Now spared of the pain, they clumsily tried to make sense of the situation. They were like babies, and Cytus was yet to get a grip of his faculties. It was his surprise at seeing Lady Maria's expression that gave him back his powers. She was not scared, but looked ever so grief-stricken, eyes turned down, while sitting in one of their embraces. Luna was gone, along with many others. The creatures made no effort of speaking. One made an effort to stand on its shaky legs. It had to hunch over, since it now was taller than the room was.
How are they alive?
Brain fluid. Grayish, amoeba-shaped brain fluid. Wobbles and bounces. Extracted from a patient whose head expanded until that was all that they were. In the early days of the Healing Church, the Great Ones were linked to the ocean, and so the cerebral patients would imbibe water and listen for the howl of the sea. brain fluid rides inside the head, the initial makings of internal eyes.